Hello, and welcome to Talk of the Town. Michael Jacobi with you, and we haven't done a show in a while, and I'm delighted to be back, and particularly excited to have my guest, Tony Fiorentino, here. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Fiorentino, that's
Fiorentino,
correct, Mike.
close enough. How are you, Tony?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you.
We're going to have a little chat about adventure, and you have a great story to tell, and the people at home are about to be surprised at how quiet I'm going to be, because I want you to tell your story. First of all, a little background on yourself. You from Los Gatos area?
Yes, I am. Well, actually, I was born in the Central Valley,
Okay.
but I've been here for like 45 years, almost 50
Did you
years.
go to high school here?
No, I went to high school in the Central Valley,
Okay.
but I came back up here to teach at Los Gatos High School. Well, actually, I taught at two other Bay Area schools before I came here to
what
Los
did you
Gatos.
teach?
I taught biology and science.
Okay. All right. Which, with your background, we're soon to find out it was probably the right move to make. You're retired, I take it? You
Yes,
retired?
I am retired, and I've been retired for quite some time now, but I kept in touch with teaching after I left and did some substituting, and then went into different vocational fields just to satisfy my curiosity, and stuck with writing and art and volunteering some services.
Well, it's particularly interesting since we're taping this at a high school, at Los Gatos High School, in this marvelous studio of KCAT's. A lot of young men are around here that are 17 and 18 that are getting ready to graduate from high school. You took a bit of a different path when you were 17. Let's set it up. The year's 1957.
Yes, I did. I was, actually, my background takes me to where I graduated very young from high school. In those days, your parents wanted to get rid of you, so they put you in school early. But anyway, I left school real early, and I went into junior college for a semester, and only to play football, and get an education, of course. But in those days, you had to do volunteer or participate in the draft.
Right.
And
this was post-Korea, though, wasn't it?
actually,
The latter part of Korea?
you mean the draft?
Yeah, well, I'm saying, yeah.
Very early on in 57, 58, they were drafting everybody under around 18
Really? Okay.
to volunteer for the draft, and pre-Vietnam era.
Right.
And so I decided to volunteer into the Navy, into the Naval Air. And the Naval Air was very much of an interest to me because I had a deep penchant for flying when I was a youngster, and we were always building model airplanes and testing our skills in flying these airplanes and things like that. But to make a long story short, when I volunteered into the Navy, I joined the Naval Air, and then happened to be in a squadron, a helicopter squadron that was attaching to what they called North Pac and South Pac.
Now, did you join with an eye of becoming a pilot?
The idea was, yes, eventually to become a pilot.
Okay.
And it was sort of a funny thing because my football career sort of interfered with that. And I had
Now, you were a pretty good player.
well,
You got a scholarship, right?
yes,
Where did you ultimately end up at USC? Or
no,
Stanford?
I had a brother that was at USC. He was an All-American there.
Okay.
And I went to UCLA because he went to USC. But I did have a scholarship to USC and a couple other universities on the coast. And so,
Great time to be in LA, too.
oh,
Beautiful.
it was very nice other than the smog
Yeah, that was, I guess, the beginning
at
of
that time.
What position did you play?
I was a pulling guard.
Okay. Right.
And but I didn't play until after I came out of the service, and then I had a commission to go into the Navy as a flyer again after I did my stint of 2 years.
Let's talk about those first 2 years. 17 years old. Where'd you do your training in the Navy?
We went to Naval Training Center in San Diego,
Okay.
and that's where all the military, Black Shoe and Naval Air, go through their training. And then subsequent to that, we were shipped out to, it's really kind of funny, we were there in a special services squadron thinking that we were going to play football for the Navy. At that time, they dissolved the football teams, and then they decided to ship us out. I went to a squadron very close to the NTC in San Diego, and it was right on the border. And my friend, my buddy that I went in the service with, went to Coronado Island,
Oh,
and he was attached to a Naval Air Squadron there on a carrier. So
the world situation at that point in '57, as you say, we're really post-Korea, pre-Vietnam, Cold War's building.
yes.
So you get hooked up with CPAC?
No, it was the Naval Air at that time. My squadron, which was a utility squadron,
Okay.
and they were into rescue and a whole gamut of other things that they did besides rescue and research and serving the carriers for crashes and stuff like that. They volunteered 2 cruises, one to North Pac and one to South Pac, they had called. North Pac went to the Arctic, and South Pac went to Antarctic. But I knew nothing about that.
You didn't know that they did that without your knowledge. They didn't.
Yeah,
They didn't
yeah.
check with you.
No.
That's so Navy.
Yes, it was. And and I was always looking for ways to speed up my enlistment so that I can get
You're
out and
just
go play
trying to play
football.
football, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was important to me at that time. I had brothers that were really good, and I was always looking up to be better than they were.
So you're assigned to a ship,
Right.
but the helicopter's on the ship.
Yes.
So you're also on the crew, or are you flying a helicopter?
I was the crew. I was
Crew.
one of the flying crewmen. I was in rescue and ice observation, and or just generally, I was a utility guy, so to speak.
So some of the boys are going north. You're going south. Is that the Cape of Good Hope south from here? What's the?
South Pac, but the
you go around Argentina.
Tierra del Fuego down
Tierra
the tip
del
of
Fuego,
South
which is
America.
Some kind of weather.
Yeah. But this was totally different than what I ever expected. And when I volunteered for this cruise, people thought I was absolutely nuts. And my squadron, they're going, "What are you doing?" And nobody volunteers for this. They shove you in there. And
Now, how much did you know about it prior to?
nothing.
No. So why did you volunteer?
Because it was exciting to know that I was going to a place that nobody
That
had
no
gone
one else,
before.
yeah, okay.
It was like going to another planet, basically. During those years, it was a peacetime, a
Right.
wonderful era in our history. That
Peacetime, don't we all?
yes,
miss
it was it was wonderful. Everybody was together. Everybody's loving one another. The Navy was not fighting with anybody. Our only adversary were the Russians
Yeah.
in the Cold War. The Russians at that time were involved with Sputnik,
Right.
and that scientific part of it. But we were headed down south to actually explore Antarctica.
Now, Admiral Byrd was involved in
Yes, he was part of that Operation Deep Freeze 3.
Now, I know the audience is saying, Admiral Byrd, that's not in the 50s.
Yeah,
Well, no. He went, I think it might have been the 20s when he originally went to Antarctica.
Probably so. Yeah, 20s and 30s.
Yeah, so he
That's
was
correct.
70 or 80 when he went.
Yeah,
when
he was a pretty old guy then at that
so
time.
he goes
and-
back to Antarctica. See if he can find his car keys.
Yeah,
somewhere.
he and Admiral Dufek were given the task of Operation Deep Freeze 3, which was one of the largest undertakings the Navy had ever had. And they had a number of ships, a number of
Now, how many
scientists.
ships are on this? going on?
I think there were about. I'd have to. My notes are not in front of me. I think about
Ballpark.
17 or 18
Oh, okay.
ships.
So it's
There were
quite a flotilla, yeah.
72 scientists, 60 nations were participating in Operation Deep Freeze 3, and two. There actually is 1, 2, and 3. They call it the International Geophysical Year of 1, 2, and 3 at that time. And so they had 4 icebreakers, cargo ships, Seabees, 4,200 men were being transported into Antarctica to relieve the troops that were there already, the scientists and troops that were there already, and it was sort of a huge undertaking of coming in there and supplying all of the stations with the needs that they had, and the fuel and the food and the bringing people in and out.
Tony, we're going to take a break. We're talking to Tony Fiorentino. about a remarkable story, and we'll get to that story specifically in a couple of minutes. But we're going to look at some photographs, and you can kind of set it up and tell folks about exactly how it all came about. And then after we come back, we'll talk specifics about some of the literally hair-raising experiences we've had, or he had. I'm taking credit. This is Talking to Town. I'm Mike Jacobi. We'll be right back.
I'm Tierney Sutton, and you're watching KCAT 15.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town. Michael Jacobi with you, with Tony Fiorentino. Tony, I was you just kind of showed folks, gave them a feeling of the vast dankness. Got to be a lonely place. But when you go to Antarctica, obviously you don't, we'll dock in San Francisco. Where do you dock? Is there a place when you get to Antarctica? Is there a main, is there a harbor where the ships normally go?
That's a very good question, because those are the things that I
where are we going to stop?
When I volunteered for this cruise, we loaded this helicopter, our 2 helicopters, on the flight deck, and then we took our stuff below. I'd never been on a ship before, other than a toy ship that you go through training on, But it was really amazing, because we loaded the ship and went down below and dumped our stuff in a little teeny locker, all of your goods and everything. And we're headed across the vast Pacific, across the equator, and all the way down to New Zealand. And docking just like any other ship does, dock in New Zealand, and then after New Zealand back out into the Ross Ice Shelf. And it's 2,100 miles, let's say, at sea for 21 days, getting there. And
how close to Antarctica do you hit the ice? I mean, you start...
Well, if you start from New Zealand, Christchurch, New Zealand,
right,
which is the closest point, I think you're a little over 2,000 miles.
So it's that far?
Yes. We went from New Zealand directly into the northern part of Antarctica, into the Ross Ice Shelf. So that took about 2,100, 2,400 miles.
Okay.
It took us about 8 to 10 days to get in there.
Is the proper word an icebreaker or ice cutter?
Icebreaker.
Icebreaker. So you obviously, are all the ships equipped with that?
No,
So
just what they call an icebreaker. There were 3 of them. Okay. The Coast Guard typically had icebreakers, but the Navy had 4 icebreakers and 1 huge icebreaker.
Okay.
The Russians were very, very good at building icebreakers, of course. They're in the north. And we had 1 big one called the Glacier. Okay. Ours was about 250 feet long. It had a double-hulled round bottom in the icebreaker, which made it roll a lot. And it housed about 250 men, and had a nice flight deck of about 40 feet by 40 feet in the back, which housed 2 helicopters. And what it did was crush the ice. It didn't really.
So you were on the icebreaker.
Yes.
And how quick? This is a stupid question, I'm sure, but how quickly do you have to follow it before the ice closes in?
That's a good question too, because the first time I had ever seen anything was we got into the broken ice about 8 days into the cruise from New Zealand, and it breaks up like little pieces of a puzzle from the air. You can see it. It just looks like tiny little pieces, but actually they're about 8 feet thick, and they range to, when you get really into the Ross Ice Shelf, to anywhere from 70 to 700 feet thick. So the fissures in the ice there's cracks already in the ice, and the ship has to follow in behind the fissure and then get up on top of the ice and crush it down, and then it creates another fissure for the ships to follow through behind. So
we're good. And you have a book called Breaking the Ice.
Yes.
Okay, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but it's basically tells the story of what happened, and we're going to fast forward a little bit.
Right.
You've got in, you've stopped at the local village for a beer. I guess that's not going to happen, is it? Well, there are no villages. Is there an encampment?
There are encampments. There are 6 bases, all of which we were heading to be able to take the guys that had winter over out and talk about loneliness there. Yeah. That was a big part of being there.
Well, there's some guys happy to see you.
If I'm sure most of you have seen The Martian. Yeah. And that guy was, but I mean, it's equated to almost like that, being alone, sequestered, without two-way radio. You know, shortwave is the only communication you have, and the weather changing constantly. And so it's like the Martian surface that they depicted, where the one day it's clear and the next day you have blowing winds and everything. But yeah, it's the bases were there. They were established. Little America 5 was there, and then we had one at the South Pole, of course, when Byrd went in and established that station in '57.
Now the technology in cold weather gear obviously has changed dramatically. In the '50s, are we just talking? We're not talking even down.
Well, we had.
Did you have down? In those days?
No, we really didn't. We had parkas, and the parkas were badger fur.
Yeah.
And we had gloves, and most important thing were the sunglasses. I didn't know anything about that. We had other gear that would fit on, and like suits. If we were flying for rescue in the waters of Antarctica, then we had what we call poobie suits. And you get into a poobie suit and you step into it and you wind it all up. And for that reason, you couldn't get out of it very long unless you came back to the base. That's the reason they call it a poobie suit. Yeah. But it's kind of comical. But you would last 5 minutes.
I was going to say, you fall in the water, it's 5 minutes for hypothermia.
That's about it.
That's it.
After 5 minutes. So.
What's the scariest thing that happened to you down there?
Well, there were a couple of times. Once when we crashed one helicopter just before, after the 1st of December. We were transporting two chaplains into Little America for services, and somebody had left a unseen tie down on the pontoons of the helicopter, and I was supposed to go along, but I didn't because we transported 2 chaplains instead of 1, and the load would have been too much. So the chief flagged him off the flight deck to transport him, but he couldn't see that tie down, so the pilot was trying to pick it up. And it was too weighted, and he thought it was the extra weight, but it wasn't. It was that hidden tie down. Tilted, knocked off the gas tank, huge explosion, and that was pretty scary. I came up on the flight deck right after the explosion and had to tackle one of the chaplains, who was a ball of fire. Poor guy.
They survived?
Devastating. It just.
Did they survive?
They survived. 3rd-degree burns, and we had to push the remains of the helicopter overboard. We had 1 helicopter left, and 3 days later, we crashed that one.
Excuse me for laughing.
No.
There's Murphy's Law.
Whiteouts, yeah. Whiteouts where you can't see the hand in front of your face. 1 minute it's absolutely clear, the next minute it's complete whiteout. You can't see a thing.
Well, colder than you possibly could imagine?
Not too bad.
Really? I've heard that.
The sun is directly overhead.
A certain point.
24 hours, and they dared me to go out on the flight deck because I was always working out, and they dared me to go on the flight deck with no shirt on. But I didn't take that dare. I wasn't that stupid. But at round 0, it wasn't so bad, and you had the warm gear on, and so it dropped to about 30 below. At times, and the wind got severe, but the worst time, the absolute worst time, is when we came out of the Ross Ice Shelf, and we went around the Cape Pallet and up to the Indian Ocean. I got caught on the flight deck within a matter of 5 minutes. 30-40 foot seas over the flight deck. The flight deck is about 30 feet off the water, or the water line.
If they're 40 feet, we're talking 7 stories.
We're talking about waves that are coming way over your head and splashing down on you on the flight deck. And I had to watch that afternoon, and they forgot about me. I was tied into the flight deck with that 1 helicopter, and I called in to the captain and asked permission to secure the watch. And he said, "What are you doing on the flight deck?" And he says, "Get below right now." And so I untied myself, and I had to really, due to my athletic ability, the only way I survived that is dashing.
About a pulling guard. You had to make that move.
That ship was riding 45 degrees this way and 45 degrees this way. So I did make it in, and that was the scariest part of my whole life, that I thought I was going to be wiped out to sea.
At what point do you say to yourself, "This is more adventure than I need"? Was in the back of your mind still going, "This is pretty hip"?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I loved adventure, and there was never a doubt in my mind that I wasn't going to survive. And I thought, I'm going to beat this, and so I did.
That's neat. The book is called "Breaking the Ice: Tony Fiorentino. It's a fascinating book. I read the synopsis. And,
Okay.
as you say, you come up across. It's analogous to me of coming up to the Grand Canyon at night, as you come across some of these ice chasms.
Oh, the fissures in the ice
Yeah,
were
they're
phenomenal.
1,000 feet
There's
deep.
so many facets to this.
And when it's a whiteout,
Yeah, yeah. If you can't see where you're going, you always follow the flags, and you want to make sure you don't fall into a fissure 200 feet like one of our tractors did. Went down with the driver and all, 200 feet.
he
into the-
died.
Yes. There's no way we could recover it. And it's just like you never know. Every step is an adventure. And when you get off that ship and you travel in the ice,
It's about wildlife.
I was just going to mention that I was at, I think it was Wilkes Station. They built this station on the ice, and there were 7,000 penguins on this that they had to displace. They weren't going to hurt them. They displaced them, moved them right out, and they say that their ghosts still exist there. But I was wandering through the rocks, and in that area at that station where there are all these penguins, and I noticed overhead there's a huge shadow. And I thought, I don't know what that is. So I kept going, and all of a sudden I see this gull coming at me. It's called a skua gull, about an 11-foot wingspan. Probably from
Really?
here. Yes. And a beak about that long and diving at me. It was like an airplane. And I thought,
And
this,
he's thinking, look at the size of that penguin.
oh, I was going, oh, what's this guy going to do to me, you know? Because it was a breeding season and they're probably protecting your young, but they're very aggressive birds.
I guess the spoiler alert is you have to read the book. It is absolutely
Well,
fascinating. Tony Fiorentino, we're up against the clock, but
Okay.
this is the kind of thing, this is what I love about this show, Talk of the Town, is we run into interesting locals like you with great stories, and we'll bring you back down the line.
Thank you very much. I
Thank you, my
appreciate it.
friend. Good
Thank you.
seeing you.
My pleasure.
Take
My
care.
pleasure.
That's Talk of the Town. Until we meet again, I'm Mike Jacobi. I'll see you soon.